I used to think death was a release for the one leaving and for those left behind. But standing at Walter's funeral, my husband of 40 years, I realized something. Some deaths close a chapter, but also open another one, steeped in bitterness. The funeral was simple, just the way he wanted. Walter never liked a big fuss. He was a reserved, meticulous man, and at times, hard to read. Maybe that's why I never truly knew what he held in his heart, not until the very end. I sat in the front row wearing my familiar black dress. In my hand was the white handkerchief I had carefully pressed the night before. Everything was in order, the way I always tried to keep things behind the scenes for him year after year. My son Nathan was different. He stood next to his wife, his face blank, not a trace of grief for his father. I didn't blame him. Everyone copes with loss differently. But I didn't expect what he was about to say. It was a stab in the back before I could even fold away my mourning cloth. After the funeral, when the guests had gone, I returned to the house filled with memories. The scent of him still lingered on the coat he used to hang by the door. I hadn't cleaned anything, not out of weakness, but because I needed to hold on to him a little longer. I heard footsteps behind me. Nathan. He walked straight into the kitchen like the house already belonged to him. "I need to talk to you," he began, firm and matter-of-fact. "I've spoken with Green Pines Retirement Home. It's a good place. You'll be well taken care of. This makes sense. For everyone." I put down my cup of tea and looked up at my son, the boy who used to cling to my dress and cry when I dropped him off at preschool. Now, here he was, standing before me, making decisions as if I were just an old piece of furniture that didn't quite fit anymore. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I felt strangely light. Maybe deep down I had seen this coming for a while. "What was the name of the place again?" I asked softly. "Green Pines," he repeated. "You'll be comfortable there. They have medical staff and everything." I nodded, offering no resistance. Nathan took it as agreement. He didn't realize my silence wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of something else, a much bigger decision. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat out on the back porch where Walter used to water the plants. The moon peeked through the aging leaves, lighting up the old notebook he had left behind. Inside were small, tightly written notes. Transferred all shares to Margaret, not to be passed on to children until they've matured in character. Send thank you note to Helen after she helped me sell the land. Remind Margaret to open the envelope from the lawyer upon my passing. Envelope, I hadn't received anything. The next morning, I went to the lawyer's office. They had the papers ready. Walter hadn't just left a will, he had orchestrated a full succession plan. Your husband created a trust. After taxes, the total value of the estate is over $8 million, the lawyer said. You are the sole beneficiary. The children won't have access unless you pass away or choose to transfer it yourself. I sat there quiet. Holding a teacup like I would at home, I recalled the moment Nathan spoke about the nursing home. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt regret. Not for the money, but for the years I had given up for a family that, once my husband was gone, treated me like I no longer belonged. That afternoon, Nathan came by again, this time with property transfer documents in hand. He wanted me to sign so they could quickly settle the house and divide the money. He said it was the reasonable thing to do. I invited him in, poured him tea like I always did. "Just leave the papers here," I said. "I'll think about it." Later that evening, I looked out the window and saw my reflection. No longer the young woman I once was, but my eyes were steady, unwavering. I wasn't trying to reclaim fairness. I was fairness. I wasn't fragile. I was quiet to better hear my own heart. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the first step of a powerful decision. A mother's silence doesn't mean she doesn't see. And the disrespect shown in the shadow of mourning will soon be unmasked when the truth begins to speak. I left the house Walter and I had shared for 40 years with nothing but a suitcase and an old wooden box. No tears, no turning back. Nathan thought I was heading to the nursing home just as he had arranged. But I wasn't. I only needed a temporary place, a quiet space to begin again, with my own silence. I called a cab to a small hotel near downtown, modest, quiet, nothing fancy, but enough for an older woman like me to live comfortably for a few weeks. The young receptionist smiled at me, probably thinking I was just a lonely widow looking for a change of scenery. I didn't feel the need to explain. The third-floor room wasn't large, a single bed, a worn armchair in the corner. But it felt right because for the first time in years I had chosen where I wanted to stay. Not to please a husband or a child or anyone else. I placed the wooden box on the table. It was a gift from Walter on our 20th wedding anniversary. It used to hold our love letters. Later, I kept it tucked away in the closet, covered with a cloth like a sacred memory. And like all sacred memories, it had been forgotten in the chaos of dinner routines, hospital visits, and the endless responsibilities of being a wife and mother. Now I opened the lid. Layer after layer of brown wrapping paper covered neatly kept documents. A stack of stock certificates, all in my name. Some long-term investment papers I never even knew Walter had, and a handwritten letter in his familiar style, straight, concise, no more than needed, no less than meant. I sat down in the old armchair, poured myself a cup of tea, and began reading. Sunlight slanted through the window, making the ink on the paper shimmer, as if the letter had just been written. Dearest Margaret, I know you'll find this box after I'm gone. You're the only one I trust to keep it, not because you're my wife, but because you're the only person who never asked for anything, even though you gave up so much. I didn't tell Nathan or Isabel about this money, because I wanted them to grow up without relying on their parents' wealth. But you, Margaret, you deserve independence. I've transferred all the shares, investments, and assets into your name. You don't have to notify anyone. Just live in alignment with your values. And if one day you are underestimated, remember real power never has to shout. With all my love, Walter. I laid the letter against my chest, my eyes blurred, not from sorrow, but because for the first time in years I felt seen, acknowledged. Walter, the quiet man, the one who always made the decisions, had left me with the final choice, and he trusted I would know when and how to use it. I sat in that small room sifting through each document in the wooden box, as if I were flipping through all the years I had quietly stood in the background. Everyone thought I didn't know anything, but the truth was, I had simply chosen not to speak. I remembered my early days as Walter's wife. His relatives called me Simple Margaret. I didn't wear bold makeup, didn't raise my voice, didn't offer opinions at family gatherings. Later, as a mother, I deferred all decisions to Walter and the kids. What school Nathan should attend, whether Isabel would learn piano or painting, I always stepped back thinking that was love. Maybe that's why Isabel believed I had nothing of my own. I remembered her careless comments, "Mom doesn't really understand finances. She's too gentle, she's not built for leadership. Mom just needs to relax and let us handle things." They didn't know I used to be the class treasurer in my college calculus course, that I once helped Walter calculate investment returns during the toughest years of our lives. They only saw what I let them see. I put the papers back in the box. Then I picked up my phone and searched for Walter's personal lawyer. I had met him a few times before, but never really sat down to talk. "I'd like to schedule a private meeting," I said. "I'd like to begin exercising my rights." That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I pulled out a new notebook and opened to the first page. I wrote the opening line. "The plan begins to reclaim what's mine." I wrote slowly, my handwriting not as steady as it once was, but every letter deliberate, every word intentional. Not to seek revenge, not to prove anything, but to exist fully in a life where I had once been sidelined. The next morning, I received a message from Isabel. "Mom, Nathan said you've moved into the nursing home. Are you okay? I feel bad. But I think, you know it's for the best." I looked at the message. I didn't reply. I wasn't angry, but I knew it wasn't time to respond just yet. I knew Isabel loved me, but she didn't understand me. Not yet. She still saw me as soft, easily influenced. A mother who knew how to nurture, but not how to protect anything for herself. I left the hotel on a gray morning dew still clinging to the car windows. Inside my old handbag was the file Walter had left me, stock certificates, investment contracts, and his final handwritten words, the ink still faintly smelling of tears. I didn't go home. And I certainly didn't go to the nursing home my well-meaning son Nathan had arranged. I had a different destination, the family attorney's office. Our lawyer, Mr. Bernstein, had helped Walter and me buy our first home 38 years ago. He was still there. Older now, hair whiter, but his eyes still held the respect I needed in that moment. I thought you might come in to discuss the will, he said. Didn't expect something bigger. I simply nodded. I don't want my name on anything. I want to establish a company completely anonymous. Bernstein raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. He got to work scribbling down a shell company name, a private P.O. box, a legal proxy. Everything clean, everything discreet. After over an hour, I pulled out a list. These are the retirement homes I want to buy. Bernstein looked up, surprised. One of them is the facility your son, yes. I cut him off. I want to own the place my son thought he could send me off to like something no one needed anymore. Everything moved quickly. Under my alias, the company began negotiations to acquire the entire chain of senior care homes. Walter, before he passed, had quietly invested in real estate, specifically in elderly care. He once told me, "We can't change the whole world, but we can change someone's life." I used the very assets he left behind to make that vision real. No one knew. Not the lawyers, not the brokers, not the representatives. No one suspected that the elderly woman sitting quietly in a modest hotel room now owned a network of facilities spanning the entire state. Meanwhile, Nathan still believed his mother was weak and needed guidance. He sent messages every few days, often with gentle reminders. Remember to rest, Mom. Don't stress about anything. Or, the facility's great, I picked the premium package for you. I replied with a heart emoji, or sometimes just, okay. I didn't resent him. In truth, I no longer felt anger, only lightness. As if all the roles I had once worn, wife-mother, were quietly evolving into something else. An observer. A woman who knew her worth but no longer needed to announce it. Once I visited the facility as the new investor. I wore a wide-brimmed hat, dark sunglasses, and was accompanied by legal counsel. The staff spoke politely, their voices carefully measured. Nathan wasn't there that day, but I saw the room he had picked for me. Small, bare, no windows. The manager said, "Your son mentioned you didn't want anything too complicated." I laughed, not bitterly, but almost tenderly. I just felt sad for the misunderstanding that still clung to Nathan's view of me. In the shadows, I was in control. I quietly began to reform the system. Phased out robotic procedures, introduced more human-centered activities, storytelling sessions, painting classes, little music corners where residents could pick their own playlists. I understood the ache of someone telling you this place is great, while all you felt inside was emptiness. I also began connecting with other women mothers, grandmothers who had been placed in homes by their children. Their stories made me realize I wasn't alone. And more importantly, we deserved dignity, not pity. As for Isabel, my daughter, she still thought I was sulking after her father passed. She once called and said, "Mom, Nathan means well. It's just, you're getting older now." I smiled. "I know, sweetheart." But inside I thought, getting older doesn't mean getting foolish. Feeling sad doesn't mean being powerless. And then one day, the company in my name officially owned the entire chain of care homes. I received the confirmation email as I was brewing tea. The water bubbled softly, and in my chest, a quiet pride rose like steam from the kettle. I hadn't responded to them with rage. I had responded with action. On a sunny October morning, I stepped out of a black SUV, my silver hair neatly pinned up, a worn leather handbag in hand. In front of me stood the retirement home, the very one my son Nathan had once chosen for me to rest peacefully. But this time, I wasn't arriving as a mother being placed away to live out her final days. This time, I arrived in a new role, Chief Executive Officer. The glass doors opened automatically. The receptionist quickly bowed in greeting. None of the staff had met the new owner, but they'd all been told the facility had just been acquired by a new corporation, and that the head of the group would be visiting today. I simply smiled and shook each person's hand politely. "Good morning. I'm Margaret. Starting today, I'll be working alongside all of you to run this place." A few of them looked surprised. An older woman, modest in appearance and slow in her step, was the new executive. But the moment they saw my eyes, the whispers stopped. There was something in my gaze, the calmness of someone who had seen more than they imagined. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't stage a loud restructuring. I hadn't come to seek revenge, and certainly not to assert power, but I paid attention to everything. I had lunch with the residents, listening to stories of wartime of children once crowding around the dinner table. I asked the caregivers, "What makes you feel most exhausted every day?" One answered, "Low pay." Another sighed, "Being treated like a worker, not a caregiver." I jotted every thought down in my notebook. A week later, I introduced a new set of policies. Every caregiver would attend regular sharing sessions, not for evaluation, but for listening. Weekend bonuses were slightly increased. I called it a love allowance. The cafeteria was renovated, small but warm and inviting. I wanted the staff to enjoy lunch without watching the clock. When a young employee asked me, "What kind of boss are you? You're not like anyone else," I simply smiled, raised a finger to my lips, and said, "I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to be underestimated. And I think you do too." I chose to live inside the facility, not in the luxury suite prepared for the director, but in a modest room on the third floor, warm and simple just like the other residents. When a staff member asked why, I said, "This room has the morning sun. I can hear birds sing at dawn. What more could I need?" That room later became a quiet space where many staff came to seek advice. They called it the confession corner. I kept my ritual of having tea at 6 a.m., opening the window and writing a few lines in the old leather notebook Walter left behind. Under my leadership, the home slowly transformed. The residents laughed more because they were invited to tell stories, to hear music, to live, not just exist. The staff loved their work more because they felt respected, not just order followers, but caregivers. Meals were no longer just about cost, but about memory. Fridays became Nostalgia Day, where each person picked a dish they loved from their youth. I didn't do much. I just listened. I encouraged rather than commanded. And I wanted everyone to understand. There are some values you can't measure in money, only in emotion. Freedom isn't about where you live. It's about having the right to shape your own life. One autumn morning, pale golden sunlight filtered through the glass windows, casting a warm glow across the quiet hallways of Cedar Haven Nursing Home. Nathan parked his car outside, stepping out with a trace of hesitation. He glanced up at the newly mounted sign on the wall, "Cedar Haven, Chief Executive Officer Margaret Dawson." Nathan let out a soft, incredulous laugh. What a coincidence. Same name as Mom. His leather shoes echoed evenly on the tiled floor as he walked inside. The receptionist greeted him with a bright smile, inviting him to wait, but he shook his head, saying he'd find his way himself. He still assumed the old woman was probably tucked away somewhere in a room reading a book or playing Sudoku, living out the peaceful retirement he and his sister had so thoughtfully arranged. When he reached the director's office, the door was slightly ajar. He pushed it gently and froze. In the spacious, sunlit room, I was sitting at the desk, tea in hand, gazing out the large window that looked onto a small garden. I wore a simple dark green sweater, my hair neatly tied up, my posture calm, perfectly at ease. Nathan stared, stunned. "Mom." "Yes, it's me," I replied, setting down my cup and smiling. "Hello, son." Nathan stepped in like a man who had taken a wrong turn. He looked around at the nameplate on the desk, the framed photo of me surrounded by smiling staff. "You're the director here?" I nodded. "I'm now running the place you once decided to put me in." There was no accusation in my voice, only truth. Quiet, but ringing like a bell. Nathan sank into the chair opposite me, throat dry. He stammered, Why didn't you tell me? Or Isabel?" The door opened again softly. Isabel entered, hair hastily tied, eyes tired but worried. She had rushed over after her shift following a text from her husband. Seeing me sitting there, not in a wheelchair, not in a hospital gown, but as a poised, self-assured woman, she broke down in tears. "Mom, why did you hide this from us? Why didn't you let us know you were living like this?" I looked at them both, my gaze gentle but not weak. I stood up, poured more tea, and answered quietly, "Because neither of you asked." Silence fell over the room. Nathan lowered his head. Isabel wiped her tears. I sat again, folding my hands in my lap. When your father passed, I know it shook you both. But it shook me too. I'd been by his side for over half a century. And yet, less than a week after he was gone, you two started talking about selling the house, splitting assets, putting me in a care facility. We just thought, Nathan spoke softly, you'd be safer here. Safety, I interrupted gently, isn't being placed somewhere without your voice being heard. Mom, we didn't mean it that way. Isabel sobbed. Maybe not intentionally, I nodded. But actions speak louder. I wasn't silent because I was helpless. I was silent because I was watching. And then I chose to do things my way. I told them everything about the hotel, the old box of documents Walter had left behind the lawyer, the anonymous company, the acquisition of the nursing home chain, including Cedar Haven. I spoke of it like a journey without flair or pride, but with quiet resolve. I didn't change everything I said. I just fixed what needed fixing. The care team here is good, they just needed support and respect. I live here not because I was forced to, but because I chose to, in a small room simple and warm. Nathan and Isabel exchanged a long look. They had never imagined their mother capable of something like this, silent, yet powerful. We were wrong, Isabel whispered. We thought we understood you. I smiled. It's all right. Mistakes are for learning. I don't take joy in seeing you upset. But I'm glad you came today with eyes willing to see and hearts willing to listen. As they were leaving, Nathan paused at the office door. He turned back hesitantly. Mom, can you forgive us? You don't need my forgiveness, I replied. You just need to change. Family isn't an obligation, it's a choice. If you don't listen when your loved one is silent, you won't be there when they finally speak. I know if I told this story, people would nod and say, yes, you had to strike back, make them regret it. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, not because I forgot, but because I had walked through the coldest days of my life and realized this meaningful life is not built on bitterness, but on inner strength and quiet freedom. After that fateful meeting with Nathan and Isabel, I knew it was time to write a letter. Not to scold them, certainly not to hurt them, but to say what I'd never had the chance to say. My dear Nathan and Isabel. If I surprised you, I'm sorry, but I do not regret it. I didn't do this to shame you or to win some game. I did it because I didn't want to live the rest of my life in a room chosen by someone else with decisions made where my name was not even considered. I stayed silent for a long time, thinking that sacrifice was simply what mothers did. But then I realized, if I don't live by my own values, how will you ever learn to respect others, including the very woman who gave you life? I forgive you, but I do not forget. And I love you calmly, completely. Mom. I placed the letter in an envelope and left it on my desk. I didn't know when they would read it, but I trusted that one day they would understand. I had sold 20% of the company shares to a community fund called the Silver Roots Foundation, an organization that supports elderly people who have no family or who were abandoned by their own. That was the path I chose, not to destroy, but to rebuild, not to blame, but to heal, starting at the root. I spent my time organizing intergenerational storytelling circles so the elderly could share the stories of their lives and children could learn to truly listen. I was no longer the mother who got put in a nursing home. I was the director, the storyteller, the woman living with intention. A simple morning, but beautiful, all the same. That morning, the autumn air was crisp. I wore the old cardigan my husband once gave me, holding a hot cup of coffee, and stepped into the small garden behind the home. Gardner the gardener, now in his 70s, was watering the lavender beds. We nodded at each other. Here we all called each other by name, no director, no ma'am. I liked it that way. I walked slowly along the stone path. This place had once frightened me, this feeling of being sent away, of being left behind. But now each stone, each branch held a quiet beauty. Because I wasn't forced to stay. I had chosen to stay. Nathan and Isabel changed by distance. I hadn't seen Nathan or Isabel for weeks. I didn't reach out. But then, one Friday afternoon, I received a handwritten letter from Nathan. Dear Mom, I don't even know where to begin. Regret doesn't feel big enough to describe what I've been feeling. I thought I was taking care of you, but in truth, I was just taking care of my own convenience. Seeing your name on that plaque stunned me. Hearing you say, I run the place you were planning to put me in, left me speechless. But when you said, because neither of you asked, I realized we've spent all these years talking, but never once listening. You might not need to forgive me, but I still want to say, I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for everything I never did, for not asking, not listening, not truly seeing you as your own person. I cried when I read that. Not from pain, but because finally words had risen from both sides. At lunch one day, a resident named Lily 85, a former high school teacher, asked me, Margaret, why didn't you sue them? Take it to the papers, make the whole country see. I just smiled. Because I don't want to win through bitterness. I want my children to change not out of fear, but out of understanding. Lily nodded. You're brave, but also very gentle. I replied, I'm not gentle. I just choose to fight in ways that let me sleep well at night. That weekend, we held our autumn picnic out in the backyard. I stood quietly by the window, watching the gathering from inside. No one called my name, but no one forgot me either. I was present, respected, and didn't need to play a part. I opened the door and stepped into the garden. No one noticed, and that felt strangely peaceful. I walked past the newly blooming flower beds, past the bench where I had once sat, and scribbled the first notes of the plan to buy back the home. I laid my hand on the backrest, cool but familiar. I know some will say she should have made her kids pay, taught them what it means to be wrong. But no, I don't need to teach them with anger. I just need to live in line with my own values. That is the greatest lesson for them and for me. Freedom doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from knowing who you are and never letting anyone dim that light. And if someone asked me if you had the chance to do it all over again, would you do anything differently? I'd say no. I'd still stay silent for a while, still endure, and then step into the light on my own 2 feet.